Hello, if you've been here before, welcome back. If not, hi. My name is David. I make videos talking about media that I want to talk about. This is my thoughts, ideas, and theories for the next 4 episodes of the Magnus Protocol, the horror podcast produced by Rusty Quill, created by Jonathan Sims and Alexander J. Newell. This is where I talk about the last 4 episodes that have happened, the most recent ones, and just give my own ideas, thoughts, ideas and theories. That's the name of the series. And yeah, these are for episodes 47 to 50, which, real fun. We're getting real close to the end of the season. If you haven't already, do check out my season 2 primer. There I talk about some of the lore and some of the stuff that I will be talking about here in these next few clips. Some more complex lore stuff that I will not explain in this video, I have already explained in my season 2 primer, so go check that out if you so desire. I also have a playlist with the videos of my thoughts, ideas, and theories for season 1, so if you want to know about my thoughts of a specific episode, go check those out. They're also separated in 4 episode chunks, with the last 2 episodes being in one video. So this is me trying to work through the mystery of the Magnus Protocol, trying to figure out what is happening by myself, and then obviously I'll be going into the fandom after the fact, after I record this, saying what other people are saying, and trying to figure out the mystery of the Magnus Protocol. One thing that I will add that I did not have in my season 2 primer is that there are some developments in the lore. In the DPHW is death, pain, helplessness, and weird. But we learned recently in episode 44, Back to Basic, that is correct. DPHW is death, pain, and helplessness, but W is actually wrongness. That's the only sort of change I have in the primer, so I'll mention that here. So yeah, let's get into the next episode. Episode 47, Repetitive Strain, CAT1RC4873-, the dates. The description is distortion, parentheses, cyclic, -- retribution. The CAT1 is an agent, and that agent is Ink5ol. It's Inksol. They're called Inksol, but it's written Ink5ol, so like, it's Ink5ol. And this episode is a rank C. DPHW, Death 4, Pain 8, Helplessness 7, and Wrongness 3. Date of incident, May 6, 2024, and date of assessment, June 14th, 2024. The author of this episode is Alexander J. Newell. It aired August 14th, 2025. A brief summary: Ink5ol, Groundhog Day, and Heinrich Bad. And entities are Spiral and Desolation. Scene 1, really short scene. Celia arrives at the OIR. She's summoned by Gwen to her office. She's frustrated, and she sighs, and she goes into the office. In scene 2, she's in Gwen's office, and Gwen tells her to knock before she's coming in, which pissed me off as well. It's like, hey, you told me to come in, and you're telling me to knock? That's exactly what Celia says after the fact, too. And it's Gwen telling her that this is the second time Celia got in late, and Gwen wanted to reprimand her. And Celia snaps at her and says Gwen isn't doing any work at all. She tells her, Gwen had told her, like, you need to be doing work, and Celia's like, you're not doing any work. She also tells her that she hasn't even opened any of her messages as well, she can see. And in this moment, there's like a stalemate of an argument, because Celia's like, I'm gonna leave now, and Gwen's like, I tell you when to finish. And they sort of look at each other, and it's like Gwen totally has power up in her, what's the term? The power is taking over her mind. And Celia is like, she doesn't have to be here. She can get another job. But she has to be here because of Sam and because of Alice. And so there's this stalemate of an argument. And at the very end, Gwen's the one who stands down slightly and tells her to just make sure it doesn't happen again. And Celia leaves, and Gwen turns on her voicemail. And it's, this was, okay, I was listening to this, and I did not expect any of this at all. I also didn't catch that Celia said that Gwen hadn't opened any of her messages. I got that, but I figured it was like messages like on her computer, but it was like her phone messages. I was like, oh, that. And then she turns on the messages, and it's a voice that I recognize. I'm like, hello? On the voicemail is Ink5ol, voiced by Vera Chalk. And I will say, it was kind of a surprise to hear Ing Five again. And yeah, they're calling Lena. This is a voicemail to Lena about the OIR. They say they're in a better place, quote unquote, and they overreacted when they call Gwen like some prissy assistant or something like that. They say that they overreacted when Gwen had talked to them, and so they want to sign the contract. They want to work for the OIR. And after that voicemail, Gwen calls Ing 50, and they pretend to not remember Gwen at all. And I feel like it's a combination of like actually them not remembering her, but also like trying to be cool about it. You know what I mean? Gwen says, "I'm in the OIR," and that kicks it in for Ink 50. And so they're talking, and there's a moment where like there's a sound in the background of the phone call, and Ink 50 is like, "Hold on, give me a second." And there you can hear like the sound of a tattoo gun going off, and it's heavily implied that Ink 50 kills the client that they're working on, and then they're like, "Okay, sorry, keep talking," which real fun. They say that they've met others like them, and some of them work for the OIR, and they convince them to join the OIR. And so they say, "Hey, give me the contract so I can work for the OIR." Gwen retracts the offer, and she says that Lena's been fired and she's in charge now, and she's changing how the OIR works. A little earlier, Ingfavel had told Gwen to not get bent out of shape about attacking her in the warehouse. And as Gwen tells them that the contract's been reneged, is that the right term? Contract no longer in play, and that they're not going to be hired. I think she also calls them an unstable external, and they get a little angry about that. Gwen tells them, and the same thing that they told her, throws it back at them, saying, "Don't get all bent out of shape." And that really pisses off Ink 50. And so I think effectively Gwen fires all of the externals and says that the buffet is closed. And Ink 50 threatens retribution, but Gwen hangs up before they even finish their sentence. And Gwen feels really proud of herself. I can feel it through the recording. She feels real proud of herself. And then she's startled when a case begins to play. And in scene 3, we hear Norse/Martin reading out a record from HMP Downview in Surrey, which is a prison. It is a notice to a prisoner of a restriction of communication. So I assume it's like a paper sent back to the prisoner after they tried sending something out. And the prisoner is Sarah Lively, who's aged 39, in Wing C, Cell 17. And the restricted person she's trying to contact is Eleanor Sophia Jax. And the reason why it's not her letter's not being sent is due to victim harassment. It is a letter written on May 6, 2024. And it says that it is a restriction from sending a letter. It is not a punishment. It is just ensuring a safe and secure environment for prisoners, visitors, and staff, and to safeguard the public. The decision to restrict contact can be appealed in September, and this restriction was written up by Adder M.K., who is the security manager at the prison. And the letter was digitized and added to the record, and thus it is read out to us. Sarah writes to Elle, is what she calls Eleanor, to work through what happened. She says she's sorry for hurting her and sorry for breaking her family, but not sorry for doing it, and says that her brother deserved it. And she's been going to therapy for 6 months prior, I guess, and she needed an anchor and decided on getting a tattoo. She says that her therapist, Dr. Sutcliffe, said in court that it was an impulse to get a tattoo, an impulse decision, but they've been talking about it for weeks before, and when they finally got the tattoo with Ing 50, it was a difficult process. Sarah wanted to get a tattoo that said, "This too shall pass," but Ing 50 said that they wanted creative freedom. And eventually, Sarah had to pay double to get what she wanted. And there is an email chain to show the length of time, but Ing 50 did not testify. And David, her husband or boyfriend, it doesn't specify exactly, but David deleted the account, so there is no copy on her side of things. And Ing 50 did the tattoo. And she got the tattoo done. It hurt a lot. And then they told her to not cover it, but obviously she had to cover it. She had to hide it from her abusive partner, who's also named David. And at home, David had grabbed her arm and it hurt and she cried out. And there's allusions to an abusive situation here, which is why all this is happening. Thankfully, none of it is shown, but it is like alluded to, you know? When he grabs her arm, it's smeared to the tattoo. And so, because of that, she decided to leave that night. And she had a go bag and money stashed away, which was suggested by Dr. Sutcliffe. She got into a cab and told the cab to just drive, just away. And they're driving, and the cab is silent, and everything is quiet as it drives. There's a really cool moment where it's describing like the rain. I think there's rain falling on the car, light shining, and then it cuts to she wakes up next to David, and she doesn't even realize when she fell asleep, and then she just wakes up next to him, and she thinks that she's in hell. A little later, she checks, and the bag and the money are in the same place, in the same hiding place as before, so it was untouched, as if nothing had happened. And so after David leaves for work, she cleans up and she rationalizes that the last night was a vivid dream. And so she starts her secret therapy session with Dr. Sutcliffe, and she tells him about the tattoo, and he criticized her impulsive decision, her impulsive behavior of getting a tattoo. And so Sutcliffe is acting weird here for her. He says he's not remembering things exactly as things were, and so this is a little confusing here. But basically, he's like, "Oh, you shouldn't have done that." And she's like, "We were talking about it. You said it was a good idea." And after the therapy session, she looks to her tattoo to ground herself because she doesn't know what's real or not, and sees that the "shall" written on the tattoo is a little ruined, but it's still almost legible. It still says, "This too shall pass." And she resolves to leave that night and waits till he sleeps and just walks out. She walks out for hours, enough that she feels blisters in her feet. And at one point, she reaches like farmland and sees the sunrise. And then all of a sudden, she's waking up next to David, or even not even waking up. She's just all of a sudden next to David in bed. She doesn't feel a transition between the farmland and the bed. It doesn't feel like any sleep had happened. It just happens. And that scares her. And so she continues through the day like normal, thinking maybe that was another dream or something like that, but she can't really understand it. But eventually she finds a stain on the sheets from her blister on her foot, because she got blisters when she was walking for hours. And that makes her feel horrible. And so she looks at the tattoo, and the tattoo now says, "Nothing shall pass." And she screams in anger, rage, and pain. And she keeps screaming. And this was kind of funny moment where she's screaming, and then she stops and has to clean up after herself. Pretty good dark humor there, because she's in an abusive relationship and she needs to get everything ready for him. And so she's like, "I just cannot deal with this right now." And so she prepares for David to arrive later that night and waits till he goes to sleep, and she kills him. And she says to Elle that she feels amazing. She felt freeing, and she wanted to keep doing it without consequence, because this is 2 times already the night had repeated, and she was like, if it keeps repeating, at least if I keep killing him and I feel good, I'm fine with that. And she goes out on a walk and she prepares for the reset, but then police pick her up 20 hours later, after Eleanor had found his body, and the reset never came for her. The court, throughout the trial, and her therapist all trying to paint her as crazy, I assume because she tried talking about the Groundhog Day event happening to her. And she needs Elle to know that killing him was not her first choice, but she doesn't regret killing him. And then she signs off. In scene 4, Celia is in the OIR. She's nodding off sleep, and the phone rings, and she wakes up calling out for Jack, her son, and she answers her phone, and it's Alice calling from an airport. And she says she's coming back and asks if Celia has had any progress about Sam. And trying not to lie, Celia tries to evade and says that she's had 4 people's workload. She says that Gwen's been on her ass, and Alice is like, okay, and Gwen's a pushover. And Celia's like, well, I've also had 4 people's workload to do. And Alice is like, okay, and did you have anything about Sam? And Alice is a little cold with her, and for not having anything, for not having anything to show. Alice went all the way to Berlin and doesn't have anything to show. Celia stayed at home and has nothing to show about Sam. And so Alice gets a little frustrated with that and tells her that she's just gonna do a debrief later with them anyways, and hangs up, which transitions us into scene 5. Alice in the airport, hanging up her phone in frustration. Heinrich's there. Heinrich asks if everything is all right, and Alice lies and says that she's fine. You can hear the static in her lie that says she's fine, which I haven't noticed any static in the last few episodes. No one's lied to each other, but then again, there hasn't been the need to. But this is the first time I'm like, oh, in a long time, that I'm like, oh, I hear it. She's lying. Heinrich says that Celia isn't sleeping and knows that it's her son. And Alice is wary. She's like, what? And Heinrich says that he has a sense of things like that. Alice never gave anything away about Celia having a son, but he can tell that just through hearing Celia's voice. Alice wants to protect them, and he says that he won't hurt them, but he has a gift for Jack that Alice has to give him. Alice won't do it, and Heinrich threatens her. He says either take the gift or he will kill her. And Alice asks why. And he says that he's the toy maker. He's Heinrich Unheimlich, that he's polite but not kind, and tells her to choose, either die or take the gift. And in a surprisingly unsurprising choice, Alice says, do it. Kill me. I will not harm Jack. I will not harm Celia. And Heinrich's like, are you sure? And she's like, yes, kill me. And he laughs cruelly at her and says, I like you. I'm not going to kill you. There was never any choice for you. The toy is already in your bag, and she will not be able to get rid of it. And he leaves. And he tells her to have a good journey and see you soon, all in German. And Alice is scared and worried about what Heinrich wants to do with the toy. And the episode ends. Notes, Celia and Gwen are strain is really fun. Things have been bubbling up, especially with the, forced proximity trope. It's so fun. Ing5ol has met other externals, ? And did Gwen fire all of the externals, including, Lady Mowbray? She said that she's stopping from using, quote-unquote, unstable externals. Does that exclude some more stable externals? Is Bonzo fired? I think Ing5ol also threatened the OIR, so we're gonna have something happen to the OIR, led by Ing5ol and the other externals, I assume, because empty threats are not something that Ing5ol does. This case, it felt spiral to me, especially because there's gaslighting on David's side to Sarah, because he deleted all her accounts, and there's other moments she wants to get that tattoo to anchor herself because she feels like things aren't real, and having a tattoo makes her feel like things are real. And so that feels to me like it's toying towards a spiral sort of fear. Things seem incorrect. Cyclical distortion. Yeah, that feels spiral to me. Also, anything about Ing5ol feels like desolation to me, especially because most of the episodes that Ing5ol appears in, pain is one of the highest numbers there, which makes sense. Pain and helplessness, which makes sense for Ing5ol. And so to me, desolation feels very prevalent here as well, because there is about pain and abuse regarding the tattoo, and then the abuse from David, and then the pain from killing him. So there's a mixture of both, obviously. Obviously, as we know, I need to say this, as we know, the fear, dread powers from Magnus archives are not present in their SMERCH 14 state in protocol. The fear entity itself, for now, the official name is just Dread, which, hello, Dread powers, Dread, makes sense. I'm just imposing the flawed structure of SMERCH 14 onto Magnus protocol for fun, because I want to. But SMERCH 14 is not present in protocol, so I'm just having fun. It's Spiral and Desolation. Dr. Sutcliffe acting weird. Unknown why. I don't know what this means. Exactly what it's trying to do. Because it sounds, if anything, that something that Ink 5 Volt did is making time move differently before that tattoo is even applied or something. I'm not fully sure exactly why Dr. Sutcliffe is acting weird. You know what I mean? But anyways, obviously, Ink 5 Volt, the things between Ink 5 Volt and Gwen occurred in 20 Social Stigma, when they attacked Gwen at the warehouse when she was trying to give them a OIR contract. And then in 21 Breaking Ground, they are trying to kill Gwen. That's when they kill a man using his own tattoos. And then the archivist appears, interrupts, and Gwen is able to get away. That all happened. That was the last time. That's basically the crux of Gwen's dislike and maybe hatred for Ink 5 Volt, obviously, because Gwen almost died. I know that Celia and Alice will get into an argument soon, because Alice would be like, you didn't find anything about Sam? Did you even try? Did you even try to do anything? Were you just stuck here with your baby? And there's going to be some fallout from that. I know that. And Heinrich does not want to hurt Jack. But what does he want to do? He says he doesn't want to hurt Jack. It didn't register as a lie, but I'm not discounting the idea that he could evade that. But also, it didn't register as a lie. And so, if he doesn't want to hurt Jack, what does he want to do? Obviously, he doesn't want to help Celia. Doesn't want to do that. So, is he trying to make Jack into his next, what are they called? He called them something. His kids that spread his Heinrich und Heimlich fear. I don't know exactly what he wants to do, but we'll see. Also, I will try to remember for the next episode, but I believe it's episode 49 that Anuja Battersby, I said in my prior video, Anuja Battersby said, hey, watch out for this episode. So that's one episode, 2 episodes away. 2 episodes away. So excited for that. And yeah, this episode was fine. I think that it is, knowing that episode 49 is going to ramp up into something, tells me that this episode is sort of like the calm before the storm. I feel like it's quote unquote not necessary, because we already have a lot of stories about Ink 5 Volt doing things, but it's definitely a pretty interesting show, interesting writing to have it formatted this way. And also, just another moment with Ink 5 Volt is not unwanted, at least. And yeah, I mean, it feels like a calm before the storm. This doesn't really do anything in the overall plot. It doesn't really add too many things, but it does fill in a little bit more story for Ink 5 Volt, which, you know, Ink 5 Volt is a really great antagonist. And so, yeah, I'm pretty fine about this episode. Not too exciting. I think obviously it's the moments before and after in the real world, quote unquote, when it's not the case, is what I mean. When it's the characters talking to each other and being angry with each other, that's when things are actually making happen, do stuff with the plot. You know what I mean? So, yeah, we'll see what happens in the next episode. I guess what I'm trying to do is have the background sort of be shifting over every once in a while. Not sure. I'll work it out. Camera placement's kind of funky. Anyways, yeah, we're next episode in. We keep chugging along. This episode felt like an episode that was for like near the end. It felt like an ending type of episode, or close to it. And that's exciting. And yeah, let's get into it. Episode 48, Temporary Positions. CAT XXXX dash the dates. The description is error, parentheses, unknown source. I've already voiced how much I dislike this type of organization system or lack thereof, and I feel like they could do better. CAT XXX, non-applicable. Rank, non-applicable. DPHWs, non-applicable. The date of incident, non-applicable. Date of assessment, non-applicable. Hello? The author of this episode is Jonathan Sims. Air date August 21st, 2025. Brief summary: Sam is being pulled by the rift, and Anya Villette. And the entities: buried desolation, vast flesh, and corruption. All mentioned. In scene 1, there's some weird sounds. It's all through the tape recorder, right? We hear some weird sounds of things around, and Sam wakes up. And he's like, I believe he's just outside the exclusion zone. And he's all worried. Like, well, where am I? Why am I back here? We hear as well, an engine approaching, and he calls out to him, asking for help. And he is sort of like there, and then all of a sudden, a thing, I thought it was a wasp, but the zap sound I heard was it being hit by the perimeter fence, so he's just outside the perimeter fence or just inside, one of those two. And the warden approach, and it's a warden named Olivia. She's not named in the episode, but she is named in the transcript. Warden Olivia, voice acted by Marta da Silva. And she approaches, and she's like, are you worried? Georgie's pet? They're calling him a pet. That's rude. But she's like, aren't you Georgie's? And he's like, yes, please save me. She's like, okay. But also, we've been looking for you for a long time. And also, why are you in your PJs? He does not know how we got here. She's like, all right, well, you're going to have to explain this to Georgie. And she takes him. And then we transition to scene 2. We are in Georgie's office still with a tape recorder. And Georgie and Sam are talking. He has no idea how he got to that location. And he just remembers going to sleep, and maybe he sleepwalked. And Georgie's like, well, I don't think you did, because if you sleptwalk past 2 locked doors and a monitored patrol circuit without anyone seeing you, that's crazy. I don't think you sleepwalked. I think, well, he says, I think I magically teleported there. And then she tells him, don't say magic. That makes people complacent. Really interesting language thing here. Don't say magic, it makes people complacent. So he's like, okay, maybe I teleported. And Georgie thinks so. Maybe he did teleport. She thinks that it's pulling him back. Sort of like a certain somebody that we know about before. And so they have this little quasi-argument where Georgie's being very pragmatic and Sam is being very emotional. He's very pathos. And it's like, it sucks that Georgie's saying all this, but also it makes sense. And he realized, actually, yeah, like things are kind of shitty right now. And what she's saying is not meant to hurt him. She's just thinking practically. She says that she wants to deal with the archivist first before sending him through, and to make sure that it's not someone else's problem. She wants to deal with it and doesn't want anyone else to deal with it. Very nice. Very good of her. Very demure. And so he's like, okay, fine. You can send me back. It's probably easy for him now because it's calling to him. So he can just dive back into the rift and just go back. Maybe. But she's like, we got to deal with the archivist first. And then you can do that. And then I can send you and you can be gone and I'm done. Right? So they have to deal with the archivist first. And then in their interim, she's like, I had a surprise for you. Might as well do it now. And she goes over to call someone. She says, is Anya still here? And I was listening to the episode. And I couldn't go on my bike ride because it was raining. So it stopped raining when the episode finished. So I'll just go on my bike ride later. But whatever. Anyways, I was in my home listening to the episode. She says Anya. And I yelp because I know that name. I know that name. Georgie said that she had contacted the Oxford Exclusion Zone asking if they had anyone else turning up from another world when Sam appeared. And they say that it has happened a few times that the people just turn up in a zone, they're half dead and starving, and then they help them recover and then send them back. And Sam is like, why haven't I heard about this before? Why didn't we talk about this before? Georgie's like, I didn't know about this before either. There's a shortage of researchers, and everything, all of the zones are community formed and not centralized. So information is a little hard to spread. And so the first time that she found out, she mobilized and she got things. So it's not like she was hiding it from him. Georgie says that the Oxford zone had found someone who had crossed over pre-incursion, and her name is Anya Villette. And Georgie had her summoned so that they could have a conversation. And there's a knock on the door, and it's Anya, who is voiced by Vicky Glover. She comes in and asks if Sam is another traveler. And he says, hi, hello, my name is Sam. They shake hands, I would assume. You can't hear that. And Georgie steps out so that they can talk. And Sam asks her to share her story. And we transition into scene 3, where Anya begins to tell her small statement, and you can hear the background recede a little bit as she is giving her statement, so it's a changing of a scene. She starts talking about how she's nobody, and she wants to be nobody. She used to be a cleaner, and she is now in construction. She was cleaning a house that had a basement that was not supposed to be there, and was transported. Sounds familiar. And she returned to the house, everyone smiled, but couldn't find a way back once she was in this world, in Archives world. And eventually she just settled down. Her parents never met here, so herself was never born. And she just started a new life here. She talks a bit about not having any sort of documentation and working through that, and eventually just worked out that she built her own life from the ground zero. Very nice. Very good for her. And all of a sudden, hey, the incursion happened. Oh no, bad things happened. And she found herself not specifically trapped in a domain. She says that stuff worked differently for her. And this is where the title comes in, temporary positions. She found herself in her first domain, which is a muddy ditch, and had like 2 people trapped in there, and they can't crawl out of the ditch, and there was broken glass to hurt them when they were crawling out. And she says that she still felt pain, but she was mostly confused. She says that everyone seemed to know exactly what they were meant to do, and at times they were just hurting each other violently or fleeing from each other. And she felt guilty, like an imposter. And eventually, the people there trapped with her just stopped attacking her and ignored her. And she just watched as everything happened. She says she still felt all the pain of the glass cutting into her or being drowned in the mud, but eventually it wasn't affecting her as much. She was not afraid. Maybe like normally afraid, like what the fuck is happening here afraid, but not like the terrified, trapped people in that domain. All of a sudden, she's in a second domain, a new domain, and she's in an apartment that is burning in fire. And there's a moment where she talks about how she, can't compare how one domain might be better or worse than another domain because everyone's personal fears are too personal to them. So saying that one domain, oh, I could survive in that domain, would be insulting. She's in a fire domain and she hates the feeling of being burned. It's the worst pain. Makes sense. And she's the only person able to leave her apartment, and she eventually tries to help others, but the people get suspicious and eventually hostile. Some of them even lock her out of their apartments. They lock the doors when she gets there, the doors that they're trying to open to get out. She has it easier there. And she talks about how she moved many, many times. She mentions she was drowning in an endless ocean. She was pulled apart by a butcher's machine. She was trapped as a lab rat incubating disease. And she still suffered. She still felt pain. She still felt fear. However, it always felt like she was an extra or a tourist. She didn't fit in. So I don't know when my microphone died, or if it even died, or if it was working. The light was on when I started recording. So I'm sorry if the audio changed halfway through and there was no notice of that. But anyways, we're recording now, raw audio. Anya says she didn't realize that the incursion had ended. She thought that she was just in a more boring domain, but eventually things made sense for her. People are outside. they're panicking, etc. And she realizes that the incursion had ended. And now she lives in a commune in Abingdon, and she found out about the Oxford Zone, and she heard about the hole on Cowley Road, and she walked over there and spoke to a warden there, and here we are. We transition into scene 4. It's still in the same moment, still the same scene. They are still talking, and Sam asks her how many times she had to share this story. She says many times. And Sam says that his traveling is similar. Like, obviously, the incursion part is different. And he asks about the other travelers. And she says that there are 3 others. Sam is the 4th. And they didn't all come from the same place, she thinks. From what she's deduced, they did not come from the same location. And they both try to find similarities and differences. Sam begins asking about the Magnus Institute. Obviously, everyone in the archives knows about the Magnus Institute, but the other travelers she talked about the Institute. So, for example, in Sam's world, the Magnus Institute was burned down in 1999. He does not mention that it's located in Manchester. I don't think that has actually been mentioned at all. When Sam's been here, I feel like that should be mentioned, but whatever. Anya had never heard of it before coming to this world, and 2 others had an active institute, but they didn't really know about it. And the 3rd one knew about it and knew that it was based in Edinburgh. And they all came from the Oxford Zone itself, from the rift in Hilltop. When they're talking about it, she tells them to not think of it as a portal, and think of it as a hole that leads to a space between places. And it's more random where you end up. Sort of like, question, is this like a wormhole type space between places? I don't really know much about metaphysical interdimensional thing, but I've definitely heard of like corridors between places. I've heard of that, obviously. I don't know the official term, but the way she's talking about it, I like how it's space between places. Really fun, really terrifying. And it's very random. And so Sam thinks that things are slightly different for him because it was one of 2 people, the other person being the archivist. He's personalizing the archivist, like, alright. But anyways, 2 people landed in the same place, the London exclusion zone, him and the archivist. And he also knew Celia, who was from here. And so Anya theorizes that maybe every time someone crosses over, it makes it easier, so it sort of like smooths out the travel or standardizes the travel. And maybe knowing Celia also helped in the transition. And Sam asks her if she's also been pulled to the rift, and she has not been. However, all the others have asked her as well, and they have also disappeared, so she assumes that they were taken back. Maybe Anya's not being pulled because it was bad timing, that she came in when it was just a small crack, the pre-incursion, and only after the incursion, after the fears escaped, that the hole became bigger, that someone could be able to pass through. And she thinks of different reasons why, if it's not that, different reasons why she is not being pulled through, but she doesn't really know. And in the end, there's not really any nice answers for either of them, and that leaves them disappointed, but they can't really do anything about it. And she says she has to report to Georgie, wishes him luck, and wishes to talk to him again before he goes. Hopefully, they'll be able to talk. I don't think so. Scene 5, we transition to a fully different location, and Sam is in the medical unit checking up on Alice. She has been hurt since the last time, episode 40. Episode 42, Hostile Workplace. Alice was attacked by the archivist, and Sam and Georgie took her to the medical ward. And so she's still been in the medical ward since episode 42. She's still there. He's checking the notes on the clipboard for her medical stuff. He cannot understand what's happening. She is making jokes. She's fine. She's just recovering. She's making jokes. Sam tells her that he might go home soon. He's kind of saying goodbye to her. And he lies to say that it'll be a safe passage when she asks, is it dangerous? And she's like, you are horrible at lying. And Georgie interrupts and says that the archivist was spotted. And Sam's like, hold on, I'm saying goodbye to her. And she's like, no, archivist. And he's like, actually, yeah, okay, bye, Alice. And Alice calls out to him, hey, don't go chasing Don't go chasing waterfalls. Don't go chasing the archivist. Stop. Don't get yourself killed. Just go straight through the portal and go back to your world. Do not harm yourself. Do not try to hurt yourself. Don't get hurt. And she tries to grab him, and he like pushes, breaks through, and leaves. He says, "I'm sorry, I gotta go," and he leaves, and the episode ends. Interesting episode. Interesting episode. Now, some of these notes are actual about the episode, and some of them are just me rambling about stuff that I want to talk about. So, here we go. Notes. Sam and Celia are both being pulled back. Something has changed within me. I don't know why I'm singing so many songs today. Something has changed with the rift. Something has changed with the portal, the space between worlds, that is making them more or less move at the same time, being pulled at the same time. Like Celia, 2 episodes ago, episode 46, Celia failed, I guess, in her goal to not be pulled to the rift anymore, and she is now being pulled back. And Sam is now happening at the same time, 2 episodes later, but I feel like it's practically at the same time that this is happening. And he doesn't know that this is happening to her, and she doesn't know that it's happening to him, but it's happening together for them. That's so nice. Anya Villette, hello. So, obviously, Anya Villette was first seen in episode 114 of the Magnus Archives Cracked Foundation. She was cleaning Hilltop Road and was pulled in by some spider legs. So, interesting things that she tells us. She says that she met 3 other travelers from 3 different worlds. She's assuming that she suspects that none of them are from the same world. They're all from different worlds. Not her world, and not Sam's world or this world, right? I'm putting these numbers for a reason. And besides that, separate from that, also we have episode 17 saved copy with Darian, who replaces his own self who is torturing his father in the basement. He pushes himself down the stairs and locks the door, and they both are dead, I assume, and he replaces him. And then the Magnus Institute takes his statement, and then he's taken to the Dr. Welling Mutea Materia Research Group. I forget exactly. That Darian, right? So, hello, that makes 7 different worlds, right? Assuming that the 3 travelers that Anya met do not share worlds with either Sam or Darian. They might, but assuming that, that's 7 different dimensions. The 3 travelers, Anya, Darian, Archives, and Protocol. 7. We can add an 8th one as well, because if you remember in 196, This Old House, in Magnus Archives, there was Aowa, who was running from Merchants, who was transported to a land now ran by Merchants, and then killed. When he was running from Merchants, found a cabin that was on Hilltop, what would become of Hilltop, I would say. And then when he falls asleep, he wakes up, all of a sudden he's in a world that is run by Merchants, and they kill him because he's a Saxon. I don't know what any of those words mean. I just read it from 196, This Old House. I don't know much about the history of that time. But anyways, Aowa either came from or was taken to an 8th world. And if he came from this 8th world, he was transported to Archives, because from my very cursory glance, it looks like the Merchants did expand throughout the entirety of the UK, but I don't know if it's like a time thing, like when I don't know. Either he came from the 8th world and transported to Archives, or he is from Archives and was transported to 8th world. One of those 2, doesn't really matter. 8 worlds. 8 different worlds, dimensions, locations are written. And in any of one of those, the fear powers are there. All of them, the fear powers are there at times, perhaps. Maybe. Don't know how any of this works. So, moving through the statement itself, talking about the entities, the ditch domain, I feel like it's buried. It's talking about mud, but the glass sort of like brings something else into it that feels like desolation-wise pain. But buried feels more accurate, but as we know, obviously, in the domains, the Smirks 14 separation doesn't really matter, but I'm doing it because I want to have fun. So, buried, there. Apartment domain, desolation, obviously fire burning. I believe this is exactly the same one mentioned in 169 Fire Escape. John and Martin go in, and John reads out a statement about a girl. I talked about this before in an episode. The girl is on fire, and she's scared. Her family is yelling that they are burning. Jude Perry is there. Arthur Noland is there. It would have been fun if Anya would have been trying to escape and she bumped into Arthur Noland and he was like, "You don't belong here." And then I would have had some Arthur Noland. Give me some Arthur Noland. But whatever. Endless Ocean. Drowning in the Endless Ocean feels vast. This might be 195 Adrift. It feels very similar. 195 Adrift had a multitude of different entities. Drowning obviously has elements of vast and buried, mostly buried because you can't breathe, but Endless Ocean feels very vast. I'm just putting it under the vast umbrella. There's a little like The Hunt, Dark in that specific episode, but for our purposes, just vast is easy. Butcher's Machine sounds very familiar, sounds very specific. Flesh, because it sounds like 178 of the processing line. In that episode, John tells about the guy who's trapped on the line and he keeps going and they keep taking pieces off of his body. This episode is right before they meet up with Daisy, or they encounter Daisy and they kill her. So the Endless Ocean, the Butcher's Remains, interesting. They might be references to those specific episodes, but there's not enough there for me to be definite. The apartment building burning, that's Fire Escape, makes sense. The ditch domain is new, and then the lab rat domain, corruption, is also new. It sounds so much like other episodes, but it's specifically because it's a scientist trapping someone as a lab rat to incubate diseases. That's a lot more specific than what we got for other types of episodes. So this is a new domain as well, corruption. Anya being less affected by the domains is very interesting. And I would say that there's many different reasons why she was not affected. And I feel like they all work. None of the explanations would counter each other. And I think that whatever your interpretation of why she wasn't affected makes sense. Just because everything is very dream logic, it makes sense because it does. Does that make sense? And so for me, I take a shot every time I say sense. For me, what makes the most sense is that she lived and grew up without the dread powers in her world. Or the dread eldritch being in her world. And then she was taken into archives, world dimension, and then incursion happened, and in incursion the fear powers couldn't really touch her because they couldn't really understand her because they are not familiar with her. She did not grow up fearing. She did not live in this world with these fear eldritch beings. And then the fear powers leave after incursion and they go through that portal, the space between worlds, and they go into the other worlds, which is why we have protocol. And so those worlds would have people growing up with these fear eldritch powers, so they would be quote unquote marked. Being marked is a big term in this piece of fiction. But like I said, any sort of explanation makes sense because dream logic, it makes sense because it does. There was no lie detected. I didn't write this down. And that was a question that I had revolving that I forget about, and then I remember whenever it pops up. But it's like when Sam is in Archive's world, talking with Georgie, Melanie, Basira, etc., having conversations. There's no reason for him to lie about anything. So anything that, or them to him. And most of the time they've just been not mentioning things, but not in ways of like trying to hide it from him, just they don't mention it. And so nothing in their conversations has stuck in my mind as like, oh, this is a lie, or why are they lying about this, stuff like that. They haven't had the need to lie. And there's a question of like, does the lie detection still work? Because we've seen in prior episodes of Magnus Protocol, when in Protocol World being recorded by the CCTV, Freddy, etc., whenever someone lies, you hear a glitch. Sam here lies to Alice, saying that it's going to be a safe transition. She hears his lie, calls him out for it. And I think that's specific. It's specific to show that when he says that lie, we didn't hear any sort of glitch in the noise. And then Alice points that out, that you're lying. There is no lie detection here. Interesting. It makes sense, because this is a tape recorder, and we never heard that in archives, and I feel like Protocol, having the CCTV, Freddy computers recording, has a little bit more of a purpose to it, versus in the tape recorder. But it is confirmation, it's good confirmation, that we cannot hear lies as a tape recorder. We can only hear lies through everything else being recorded. I was listening to this episode. It wasn't that scary. It was interesting. It added more for the domains, and it was really interesting for all of that. However, it wasn't that scary, which is fine because it had scary concepts. The different domains, obviously descriptions of the domains, adds horror, but the story itself was not scary. It was interesting, right? However, there was a one line that I had mentioned before that when I was rereading the transcript, that I can't really articulate why it scares me. But Anya said that she was really confused because the people trapped in that domain knew what they were meant to do, and she didn't. And that felt odd, strange, wrong, and human. Because these are people that are ruled by fear, and they knew exactly what they needed to do. However, at the same time, we also know that these people are aware of things that are happening. And the two examples I have are 187 checked out. John encounters a woman looking for her son who is trapped in Helen's domain. She's running around trying to find her son. She finds him and is pleading for him to help. She's aware that she's trying to find her son, and there's a moment where she's like, wait, I've talked to you already, talking to Helen. I already talked to you. You're the really nice reception lady. She's kind of slightly aware about that. And also in 184, like Ants, Jordan Kennedy is aware that he's in a nightmare when John turns him into an avatar. He knew what was happening to him. He does not want to return to that, but he also is just angry in general. But the idea also that the people trapped in those locations, knowing what exactly to do, having an awareness of what's happening, and also acting in violence and in fear. Just really, really, like, because Jordan attacks Leto, 184 like Ants, attacks him, pushes him back. There's a bunch of other domain episodes where the victims hurt each other in their scramble to get away or to get out or to stop. And just those like little snippets of humanity unleashed is terrifying. I can't really say why I feel that way. What about these lines, this specific line, they knew exactly what they needed to do. It's just terrifying. People are dreaming, but also awake, and they're controlled by fear, and their fear is heightened. But yeah, I just don't really know what to feel about that moment. I just felt strongly about that. And so if you felt something like that, if you can make sense of what I'm trying to say, please let me know. But anyways, that is the end of the episode. We're finished episode 48. Next episode is episode 49. That's the one that Nusha Battersby has been alluding to. She at first said it was episode 48, but then she corrected herself and said it was actually 49 because production schedules, I believe. And so I would assume, I was thinking, obviously, you can see that this episode there's two different plot lines. There's Protocol and Archives. And Archives is probably produced somewhat separately, somewhat differently, and then Protocol somewhat differently as well. And so she probably thought it was episode 48 because it was like right after episode 46's recording. And so things were a little messed up there, but next episode is set in Protocol, it looks like. And something's gonna happen with Gwen. I assume because it's Anuja Battersby, but I don't know. Can't wait for that. So I will see you when episode 49 drops. We'll see what the fallout is. This time I did remember to charge my microphone, so sorry about that. This episode, I've been talking about it before. Anuja Battersby on Twitter has been talking about this episode, really exciting. And spoiler alert, it was, but as usual, her and Billy Hindle on Twitter post tweets for the early release episodes, and they have like GIFs for the episode that tangentially related to it, and they kept talking about pipes. And I was like, pipes? How does this relate? But what we eventually got was so good. Case notes, episode 49, Pipelines, CAT2RBC3455- the dates. The description is architecture, hubris, // plumbing, historical. The CAT2 is a subject, so the subject would be the baths, and it is rank BC. The PHW, death 3, pain 4, helplessness 5, wrongness 5. The date of the event was July 10th, 2011, and the date of the assessment is June 17th, 2024. The author of this episode was Alexander J. Newell, and this aired August 28th, 2025. Brief summary, Elias in the pipes, and entities are buried. In scene 1, we are in the OIR in Gwen's office, and Alice barges in. Gwen's like, you need to knock first, Celia. And it's not Celia, it's Alice. And she's like, nope. It's me. Gwen's a little pissy, and she's like, how dare you come in like this? You've disappeared for weeks, and you only sent, like, blurry receipts because she told her to make sure to get receipts so that she can claim expenses. And she only ever sent blurry receipts. And Alice asks for Celia. Celia is not there. Gwen says she should be, but she's not. And she gives Gwen Heinrich's toy. She tosses her a souvenir, she says. And she says she couldn't get rid of it. It was she tried burning. She tried throwing it in the oh my god, Thames. Oh my god, British. It's Thames, right? Yeah, in River Thames. Ugh. In the river, she tried tossing it in the river, and it clawed its way back out. We still don't know what kind of toy it is. At least it's in a box. And she tells Gwen to like store it somewhere because she assumes that the OIR has some place to store things like this. She says, no, there isn't. This is a desk job. However, Starkwall might have a place to hide it. They might have an artifact storage, is what she says. So she'll see what she can do. And she asks, talking about Starkwall, how was Dane? And Alice says, he looked the part. This is not an exact quote, but he looked the part. And he did die horribly, so 2 stars. Really funny. he was killed by Heinrich, and Gwen is like, oh, I didn't know this. And Alice says she didn't want to tell her over the phone, and plus she got really busy with Heinrich, so she didn't really have any time to think about Dane's death. And they were busy looking into Klaus Schweitzer, and Gwen reacts at this point because she recognizes the name. And she's like, I didn't know that the name of the programmer was Klaus. And Alice is like, it is. Why? And Gwen reminds Alice of when she asked her about an old IT staff. Throwback to episode 5, personal screening. Gwen asks Alice who was the IT guy before? There was a woman who worked as IT before Colin. They named the woman, and Gwen is like, no, it's the German guy with lots of tattoos. Oh, that guy. And Alice is angry that Gwen knew, but Gwen asserts that she didn't connect the dots. She didn't really know who Klaus was. And I think that Alice is angry that she quote unquote wasted her time going to Germany, but like I still think that even if Gwen knew, or maybe, well, if Gwen knew about Klaus, she would have still gone to Germany and routed right back around. Or maybe it could have been like, hey, we can ask Lena or investigate here instead of going to Berlin. But either way, I think it was still very helpful to go to Berlin to get that information. Gwen says that she saw a video of Lena shooting Klaus and that maybe he survived. He was shot in the gut, but he got away, so she's not sure if he survived or not. And Alice connects the dots there. Very, like, she does it without saying anything. And it was really cool because I was like, oh, I can see her thinking about this. And she sees that Gwen used that video to blackmail Lena and get her kicked out. And she accuses her of that. She was like, I thought I was holding on to stupid faith, stupid hope that you were just sort of good at your job. But no, you just kicked her out. You ousted her. And Gwen says, well, no, I didn't just find the video. It was sent to me by... Alice is like, Freddie, did Freddie send it to you? And she says, yes, but no. It was Augustus. Augustus sent her the video and told her what to do with it and how to use it to get Lena out. They've been talking, sort of, she says. Okay. And she says that Augustus knew things that she wanted. And there was a point in time where Gwen wanted to leave the OIR, but she got warned about what would happen if she did leave. And Alice is confused, and Gwen plays her a case, which we transition into scene 2, where Augustus reads out a property information form from Seville Knight. It's for the benefit of Elric Capital Investments. What follows is a bunch of legalese jargon talking about the property. That is the Strand Lane Baths on 5 Strand Lane, London. So it's a bathhouse in the street called Strand Lane. And it is currently owned by National Trust England after the Bouchard leasehold disputed owning it. So Bouchard and National Trust, I believe it's specifically that Bouchard is like, we don't own this. And so it has gone back to National Trust, and National Trust is like, no, you did own this, etc. I think that's the conflict here. I don't think they're trying to I don't think they're trying to hold on to it. I think they're trying to get rid of it. The National Trust contact is Shaban Enlow. It is a restricted historical site that was built in 1612 and has structural damage from flooding. It is currently in a legal dispute. The ownership is contested between the Bouchard Estate and National Trust. Again, I think it is National Trust and Bouchard Estate do not want to own this bath place, and they're contesting about who actually owns it. It has been the location of violent crimes and unexplainable deaths before, that being William Weddell in 1792 and Elise Bouchard in 2011. I don't fully know if, what's his name? I literally just said it. William Weddell was killed because the question was either violent crime or unexplainable death. I don't know if it means that he committed that Weddell committed a crime and was arrested for it, or a crime was committed on him and he died. Don't fully know there. I think parsimony, he died there unexpectedly like Elise did. We'll get to that. But I think it's parsimony. Occam's razor, he died in 1792. But of what? I don't know. Maybe his name will come up later in the future. The baths have been investigated by the police, but have not yet been remediated for human remains. So it's been looked into, but the human remains that I guess they have found or trying to look for have not been recovered yet as of the time of this form. There have been some issues with utility systems, and there are also environmental hazards. Those environmental hazards being lead piping and lead-based paint. And there has been unapproved modifications and existing warranties and other stuff like that. And it just evolves into like more legal jargon that I don't fully think is really important unless it is, and I'll be proven wrong in a later time. That's fine with me. The forms were signed by a Jason Knight and a Derek Seville on September 20th, 2013. So it has been a full 2 years since the events of the statement when this form was created. There's an additional document attached, and there's also like a little note from Jason Knight saying that it sounds like a mental health incident. Makes sense, he says. That's really rude. And the form that he's writing to, I believe the Jason Knight and Derek Spiel are property sellers that work with Elric or work for Elric, but not exactly Elric. And they're sending this form to Elric because it said it was for the benefit of Elric Capital Investments. I assume that he is reaching out again to Elric, being like, "Hey, if you want to work with us for another actual Roman site or historical property, let me know." He's networking. So what follows, the additional documents attached, is a series of emails between eliasgoeshard@gmail.com and Jason B @sevilleknight.com. So it's Elias Bouchard to Jason Knight. And on June 3rd, the first email is June 3rd, 2011 at 11:29 a.m. And it seems that they have finally settled on the sale, and they have looped a Sebastian from Elric out. So again, here is Elric Investments, Knight, Seville Knight Property, and Bouchard. They finally have done the sale, and so Elric is out. They've already done the money stuff, so now it's just property and the owner, quote unquote. I think that's what that means. They have finally convinced the NT to give over the lease. I was like, "What's NT?" I think that means Natural Trust, because Natural Trust had owned the baths before, and that's why there's this ownership dispute. And then he says something along the lines of like, "Oh, they had so many T's and C's, but they should thank me that I'm taking over now." And I did have to look up, and T's and C's is terms and conditions. I should have known that. He now owns Roman baths. He tells Jason to let in a shaman, so I assume that Jason is there looking over the construction. And the shaman's there to test the convergence and look at ley lines. A shaman. He also tells Jason to not ask about the rock map. I didn't write this down in my notes. The rock map, as from what I saw, I thought he just meant like rock map, but it's rock map. French, I believe, maybe, but it's I think one of the first maps that was made for London, or a really good map that was made for London. So I don't know what that means, but that's what a rock map is. Also, I forgot, I'm so sorry, Tim Fearon asks Augustus, reading out all of the legal jargon in the form. Natural, good, fun, I liked it. And then he gets into Elias talking, and then Elias is saying things like, "Hey dude, LOL." This has the same level of really funny text compared to how people are talking. Like that one episode, literally the first episode of Archives, where John reads out LOL. So throughout the emails between Elias and Jason, the normal ones at the beginning, Tim Fearon / Augustus, Tim Fearon performing as Augustus, does a really great job delivering these hipster lines, and it was really fun. And then, literally a minute later, on the same day, Elias sends Jason another email saying that he found someone to check the water. And then 2 minutes after that, another email that says, asks Jason if he knows anyone that does Roman reconstruction. And every time we get into one of those emails, we hear the subject line, and it started with the baths ! And so I assumed that Elias, Jason, and the Sebastian that he looped out had an email that was like, the baths. And then he started this other conversation between just him and Jason, which is why it's baths. And every time an email is sent, he's just simply replying to the same email chain. So the re's keep building up. And that's really fun because I could totally see and would love them if they took the one clip of Augustus saying re and just clipping that and copying it on top. And so it's just exactly the same reading of it again and again. That would be very fun in production. I don't know if they did that or not. I don't know how anyone else would feel if they did that, but I think that would be really fun and cuts time as well, and also really fun. But yes, as the emails keep coming, the re's keep growing, and eventually it gets very, I mean, it is repetitive, but it's also kind of fun and terrifying hearing the re's. And also, I will say, beyond just like the repetitive robotic re's, it also kind of shows how juvenile Elias was, because he didn't even think of making another email chain. He just kept replying to the same email chain. That, to me, adds a little bit of immaturity to him that I found very fun, along with the kind of creepy, repetitive sound. Next email is June 5th, 11:19 a.m. Elias tells Jason that the shaman is on board. So all of these emails also are just Elias to Jason. We don't get any emails from Jason to Elias. Very similar to episode 11 Marked, where it's just Gordy talking to Allison and not Allison to Gordy. The shaman is on board, but the bathhouse is not on the Strand ley line. So the Strand obviously is the road. I assume it's a long road, and they're trying to connect it to the ley line on Strand Road. But the shaman does say that the bath still has some energy, and that it's just simply that Caesar's well will have to pick up the slack. What slack? Hey, what slack? Next email is June 6th at 11:02 a.m. Elias tells Jason that the Roman reconstruction guy just laughed him off when he offered the job, and tells him to steer clear of him in the future. He lost a client there. I think that's supposed to say something, but I don't know. I think of overall, I think it's trying to say that, hey, they lied to Elias, and this is not an actual Roman bath. So the things that happen after the fact are interesting. But I think it's trying to imply that this is not an actual Roman place, especially because it was built in 1612. So, like, they lied to him. Elias found a guy to do renovations on Roman stuff. And again, he tells Jason to not loop Sebastian back. Everything that they're doing is within scope. And he will soon have completed the Roman bath, and it will feel like a true Roman bath. He says something like, it'll have the energies of, and then he says a name that I had to look up. I don't remember how it's pronounced. It starts with a V. It's not Vesuvius, but it starts with a V. It's a Roman name, and it is simply just a Roman emperor. And I think he's trying to say that it's giving Roman emperor vibes in the thing. I thought when I first listened to it that it was something about like magic or whatever, power. But no, it's just that it feels like a true Roman place. And he also adds, despite what the architecture group says, which is them probably saying this isn't a true Roman location. So all signs, to me, point that they're lying to him, or he's lying to himself. That too. Elias says that the water guy is coming soon, and he will put the rest, the quote-unquote modified cistern nonsense. Another clue that this is not a real Roman place. And it will prove that it's a site of real power. Okay. And he knows that Jason doesn't want to hear more about this because they finally finished all of the sales stuff. But this will be the last time, he promises. The next email is June 9th at 10:02 a.m. Elias says that the water levels that the water guy went to investigate was high in nitrate and phosphate, but there was also a presence of lead. But Elias just plays it off. He's like, oh, it's just old. That should be there, right? Doesn't say anything about that. Next email, June 10th at 6:03 a.m. After Jason left, Elias looked around the place before the construction began, and he felt a buzzing of old Romans across the wall, like the energy of old Romans across on the other side of the wall. And as he's looking around, he finds a secret door, and it opens. And as he talks about entering it, He compares it to a past vacation that he had. He had visited Pompeii, and he felt nothing of the past. It just felt like rock. He then visited the Herculaneum and felt that the past was all still there. It was all preserved in a mudslide that had destroyed the town, similarly to the Pompeii being destroyed by a volcano. However, in Herculean, it was all buried alive, and it still felt alive. And he finds this secret room felt very similar to that. He can feel the past alive in the present. And inside, there's a bunch of intact mosaics and frescoes. And depicted on these frescoes are chimeras of plants, animals, and people. Things being transmuted into other things, grafted onto other things, made into horrible stuff. And he decides to follow these lines of transmutation towards more and more other different paths of transmuting organisms, horrifying things that he cannot make sense of. And eventually he finds that all the paths lead to a nondescript door on the base of a wall, and he wants to open it. But he stops himself and says, you know what, I cannot go into this without giving proper notice. I'm going to come back later tonight with more gear. He gets a flashlight or a torch in the UK, a digital camera, no pictures taken, and a hard hat that he just got from the workers. Very juvenile there. And he wants to go in around 7 at night once the workers leave. And he invites Jason to come as well. Next email, June 10th, 7:34 p.m. He heads into the building once more, and he feels everything buzzing. It feels very strong. He thinks he can hear conversation on the other side of the walls. The past is here to greet him, and he's so excited for that. The rest of these emails are the same day on June 10th, 7:48 p.m. The door is full of lead pipes. It's getting difficult to move through them. It's too hot, and there's condensation everywhere. And he manages to scald himself on a pipe or two every once in a while because he gets too close to one. And he says to Jason he might need some help getting out. 7:54 p.m. He pleads Jason to answer his phone. He's stuck between two burning pipes and he cannot get out. He needs some help, but no one is answering the phone. 8:01 p.m. The pipes are moving and they're burning him, and he pleads for help. Really terrifying moment here. And then I'll let it play out, but the last email is at 8:03 p.m. And it is a message that just devolves into indecipherable text. And it being read out was terrifying. Oh, once again, Augustus Timferin, you're so good. This is what it sounds like.
Elias goes hard at hotmail.com to Jason B at savillesnight.com. Ray, 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 The Baths. 10/07/2011, 8:03 p.m. Help us. Hey, Holland Grove. I get up for. I did
Yeah, that was really fun. And we transition into scene 3, where Alice is a little confused, and Gwen says that Elias was her uncle. Big reveal here. We did not know how Gwen Bouchard was connected to Elias Bouchard, and here is the answer to that. It is her uncle. I was betting on either brother or father. Uncle is good. I was like, if he's a cousin, then that's not that exciting. I was like, he might be a brother or father. But if it could realistically also be cousin, and that's not as exciting to me. But uncle is a good bridge between what I wanted and what I expected. She says that he's the only person who listened, I assume, to her, but then she stops and just continues talking about him. I can feel that he meant a lot to her, but she plays it off. And she says that he disappeared and didn't know what had happened to him, But Augustus answered and showed her how Elias died. Alice says that Freddie tricked Gwen into ousting Lena over a stupid father figure, and Gwen says no, this was a warning to Gwen, of not knowing enough, and the only way to survive dread is to master it. And she says Elias is an idiot, and Gwen was an idiot, sorry. And Gwen will not be that. She is now in control. She will not be the idiot that stumbled upon something. And she is now in control. And Alice is still unconvinced, but Gwen dismisses her. She says, yeah, I don't need you anymore. You can leave. And we transition into scene 4. We are in the OIR break room, and Celia and Alice reunite. And it's a really nice scene here. Celia apologizes for not doing anything for Sam while Alice was abroad. And Alice is like, it's okay. I was thinking about it, and, I can't force you to do any of this because you have your own life. She tells Celia if she wants to leave, Alice understands. If she doesn't want to continue doing all this, she understands because she has a child to take care of. And Celia hugs her. It's like, no, I will stay and help you. Now that you're back, we can work together and move forward. Which was really nice. Every once in a while, Alice surprises me, but it's not a surprise. She seems to be a very mature person. She just hides it under this veil of aloofness and jokey jokes because she knows what's best to survive, which is why she's a great contrast to Sam, who is not as mature as she is, but presents himself as mature, despite actually being a fucking child at times. Alice is not a child at times. She plays at being a child. You know what I mean. She is more pragmatic, more mature than we realize, because she's thinking about this. She also knows that she's putting Celia and Jack in danger, so she's trying to get her out. I didn't get a sense of that, but I know that that's also on her mind. Either way, Alice is very, very mature here, being I know I was angry, but it's fine. We're moving forward. If you do not want to continue, that is understandable because things are getting very, very difficult. And Celia says, you know what? I will continue. I want to continue. I want to make up for what I haven't done. And Celia and Alice are better now, and I'm really happy about that. So they hug, and Celia affirms that she's in. Scene 5. We're back in Gwen's office, and we're on hold over the phone. And lo and behold, who answers but Brett Lars? Oh my god, his American accent. And he says that he was going to call back. He just heard that Alice returned, and Gwen says that's correct. And then he says, and I also just heard that our operative, Dane, was killed. And there is a break here. There's a moment here where he says, he died. And Gwen says, correct. However, when I was listening to this on my bike ride, I use an app to track my distance. And every once in a while, every few miles, it stops whatever is playing and says, you have biked this much at this time, and keeps track of my biking, right? And when it does that, there's a big pause of wait, and then the app speaks. And so he says, I just heard that Dane was killed. There's a big pause, and it was so big. And I was like, oh, he got Gwen. And then it's the app actually speaking to me. I'm like, fuck! That was so funny. And then once the app finishes reporting my exercise, podcast continues, and then Gwen's like, correct. So it was really funny because I thought that was a big, big pause, but it was just technology messing with me. Whatever. It was just something really fun that happened. At this moment, Gwen is angry about Dane getting himself killed and leaving Alice without protection. And Brett's analysis and reconnaissance. He keeps saying that these random faceless people found this information. Says that Dane was killed by their in-country agent. She says, yeah, that's right. And Brett apologizes for the poor performance, but affirms that they can only operate successfully with all the right info, and that the threat level of the in-country contact was misrepresented by the OIR, which is why if they had known Heinrich was dangerous, they would have, I don't know, gotten two Danes there? Maybe. Everything that Brett says is a bunch of BS. It's a bunch of bullshit, a bunch of capitalist, like, we're not liable. Very Elric coded too as well. Gwen is angry about the quote-unquote suboptimal outcome, but Brett points out that the field operatives are individually licensed private subcontractors, so Starkwall is not liable for them fucking up. We didn't hear that the first time. We were assured by Brett. But anyways, he also says that the reconnaissance shows that Alice was not under duress, so Dane's death didn't change anything in their plans, almost throwing it in the OIR's face that even after their operative was killed, the OIR just proceeded as usual, normally, leaving the, what was it that Dane said? OA? Area of Operation? AO. Yeah. She left the AO with the in-country contact. So it didn't do anything. So why are you angry about it? In the end, Gwen rejects Starkwall's offer for working with the OIR as protection, and Brett is sorry to hear that, but accepts her decision. And he says that the complaints department will contact her soon. He wishes her luck in finding other security, and here we hear a little glitch, a little lie. He does not wish her luck. And he says that if you want to change your mind, you can always just call me. And Gwen hangs up. And there's a moment, and she begins to call another number. And we're like figuring out who is this she calling? What number is this? Beep, boop, beep, boop, boop, beep. What number is this? And then who hangs up but an answering machine? And she calls Lena for help. She's like, Lena, I know you told me not to answer you, but the answering machine says that the phone number has been disconnected. She can no longer contact Lena. And the episode ends. So, notes. So this episode, really fun. I loved this episode so much. And anything Tim Fearon does as Augustus is just amazing for me. Really liked his delivery of all of the hipster sounds, voices, words of Elias Bouchard. Elias Bouchard, I miss you. I miss you, my boy. And he is dead, but he's been dead for like the past 10 years, 12? No, it's 24, 2011, 13 years. He's been dead for the past 13 years. And Gwen's like in her mid-20s, I would say. So she was around 10-ish when he died. So that's fun. This episode presents more questions than answers, but then again, those questions are also not that big. It's a really interesting another addition to the mystery, another thing with Elric, obviously, but it doesn't really do much for the plot beyond just motivation for Gwen. And it does give, this is a very Gwen-centered episode, and I do really like that as well. And so even though there's not that many answers that we get from this episode, it's fine because the things that we do get are really good. And the questions are not new questions. They just simply add on to other questions. Does that make sense? So it's since January 29th, 2024, Gwen's been in contact with Augustus, ? Because that's when she got the Klaus video. So she's had this case at least since then. I can totally see her keep continuing to listen to that case again and again, obsessing over it. Because Elias Bouchard is her uncle. And like I said, there's a big question as to how was Gwen connected to Elias because they share the Bouchard name. Considering also that Elias in Magnus Archives was taken over by Jonah Magnus, so everything that Elias does is not Elias but Jonah, but the Elias Bouchard name is definitely still important. Here, there's a lot of questioning, there's a lot of theorizing about who Gwen was to Elias. Here is the answer. He's an uncle. And also, I have to say, I do not take the credit. Someone else pointed out to me that, hey, he was killed by pipes. He was brutal pipe murdered by the building. Hubris, architectural hubris. and he was by brutal pipe murdered himself. Great full circle moment from when Elias brutal pipe murdered Urine Lightner. Now, all we need is a Urine Lightner stand-in to brutal pipe murder a building. Yes, that's exactly what we need. The entity, I would say, is buried just because of the connection with like the mudslide that trapped everything alive in that one city in Italy, and then like the pipe stuff getting trapped, flooding, but it's less like an entity there. I can see stuff about the buried there, but it's not entirely just buried. I can't really attach an entity to this because I couldn't get a read as to what kind of fear is happening here, but there's a lot of dread happening. So, and also really important to note is that there's lead here. The presence of lead is very, I wouldn't say, okay, I don't know if it's very important. I don't know if it's important or not. However, that is most likely a connection to alchemy, being that there has been some cases where chemicals have been present and probably did something. And so the focus on lead every once in a while in this episode says something to me. You know, lead paint, lead-based paint, lead in the pipes, there's lead in the water, modified cistern, stuff like that. So I'm keeping a track of Gwen's fuck-ups. First, she ousted Lena, the only person who knows what the fuck is happening here. Then she antagonizes the externals, fires all of them, says, I don't need you anymore. And the externals, they're dangerous. And lastly, so far at least, she has removed security. Starkwall will no longer be helping them, at least for now, will not be there. I can totally see, like I said prior, if the externals attack the OIAR, how will they defend? She'll probably have to call Starkwall, and if she does, Starkwall will probably try to help them, but their response will be very slow because there have been delays. Oh no. Gwen's really fucking up. She also forgot to think about the gift from Heinrich to hide it, so that's still floating around. Hey, Gwen. And also, Lena is no longer a resource. Her phone number is disconnected. It would be really fun if, like, Freddy gives Gwen another different phone number and it's just straight to Lena. And Lena's like, how did you fucking get this number? Lose my number. Stop trying to contact me. And Freddy keeps giving her Lena's number every time she registers a new number. That'd be really funny. Don't think that's going to happen, obviously. But I can totally see that. But yeah, Lena is no longer reachable by Gwen, which I think is a very bold choice to do, and I like it. I like that Gwen is now fully alone with the mistakes that she's done. Talking about mistakes she's done, I can feel some parallels between her and John in terms of, you know, dread. She says that the only way to survive it is to master it. And for her, mastering is knowledge. And John needed to know more, needed to know what's happening. And that led him down a bad path. Gwen's going down a bad path here too as well. So I can see some parallels here for that. And lastly, something that I don't really have a good grasp on. There's a connection here between like Elric, ley lines. There was an episode prior, I believe, where the Magnus Institute dealt with ley lines. I don't fully remember. But the shaman being there too, about power, the cistern well, the Caesar's well, that's it, power, and how the shaman was looking at this bathhouse, seeing it had enough power, and then Elias says that the Caesar's well will have to pick up the slack. So I can sort of understand something about like using both locations of power with a ley line to do something. Something about the convergence as well. What is the convergence? Is that also a Magnus Institute thing? But this is set in 2011, so it's like 10 years, literally 12, no, oh my god, math, 12 years after the Magnus Institute was burned down. So did Elric pick up a bunch of Magnus stuff and kept going with it? I don't know. I don't know enough about ley lines. The convergence, what is a convergence? Why is there a shaman? What? Yeah, I don't fully understand that, and hopefully things will fall into place at some point, and I will know. But yeah, This was a really fun episode. Anuja Battersby, I love you so much. Thank you so much for making me be aware of this episode. Honestly, if I knew that this episode was, if I didn't know that this episode was important as it came, I would still feel as amazed by it because we got great lore about Gwen. Gwen centered Bouchard, Elias Bouchard, brutal pipe murdered by the building. And yeah, really excited for the last episode. I believe there is going to be a hiatus after episode 50, between 50 and 51. But we're getting into the downward turn into the end of the season 2. Really excited for that. And I'll see you for episode 50. This was just a coincidence, but also I was going to wear this shirt yesterday to class, but the other shirt I was wearing on top of it wasn't going to match it, so I just changed it for another shirt, and I was like, oh yeah, I still have to record this today, so we have the Magnus Archives shirt again. So this is episode 50. We are recovering from the amazing episode that was last episode 49, Pipelines, with the amazing reveal of Elias Bouchard and Gwen being Gwen and everything around that. And now we're finishing up another storyline, or not even finishing up another like arc, I guess, because we get into 50, which is 2/3 of the way through the season. And yeah, we're getting close to the very end of season 2. So exciting. Episode 50, Deep Trouble. CIT XXX, description, error, parentheses, unknown source. Everything is as usual, not descriptive at all. I'm not even going to do the stats anymore because they're just going to be the same thing. But the author is Jonathan Sims, and the air date is September 4th, 2025. Brief summary: submarine. Thank you. And archivist attacks. And the entities are I and several parentheses see notes section. We'll come back to that, obviously. And scene 1 of this, all this episodes and tape recorders, we are in the archives world. Wardens Olivia and Callum are doing patrol looking for the archivist. This is right after the archivist was spotted in the zone, and Georgie and Sam went running to try to find him. Wardens Olivia and Callum are voiced by Marta da Silva and George Bunting. And they're in the zone. It is active. It is moving. There are sounds all around them. And they start talking about the archivist. And they say that there's a rumor that it used to be human. And it's a rumor that it used to be a particular human, alluding to Jonathan Sims, the archivist. Callum thinks that things would be different if he was back. The world would be ending. And Olivia's like, the world already looks like it is ending, or has ended, or will end soon. And at this same time, the archivist monster appears and takes Callum away without Olivia noticing. And so Olivia just starts talking by her own self. She says that the zones are as bad as they were after Towerfall. So like in the aftermath of all the fears leaving, the residual fear bubbling up is what it looks like how it is right now, which means everything's very unstable. And she sees a new door with a peephole. She asks, Callum, do you recognize that before? I'm going to look away and look back. Oh, see, it's gone. See, things are bad. And then she notices that Callum's gone and then calls for him on the radio. And then through the radio, he begins intoning. He first starts with, I'm down, which is a standard sort of way, like, oh, I'm hurt, please help me. And then he continues. That was pretty fun. And so Olivia calls it into control, saying that something happened to Callum, but she's attacked. There's gunshots. I'll put the sound on right after this, but there's gunshots, and then she's killed by, she's bitten by a fog with teeth.
Control, this is one.
I kind of heard it, kind of not, but thank you so much for the description for letting me know about that. As this is happening, Callum keeps speaking, keeps intoning, and we transition into scene 2, which is Callum's description of his domain. And it is really well written, I will say. I did have a lot of fun with that. However, not much of it is that important, so I'll only highlight the things that I kind of liked or want to point out. He's trapped in an iron tomb in a submarine, and he's scared of the crushing abyss around him. He has a captain that shouts orders, and Callum has to sit at a radio and call out for orders or to do something else. He's just at the radio, right? The captain is eyeless and has bloody saliva, and he calls out messages that make no sense. He specifically lists out Poseidon, Neptune, Mazu, Leviathan, and Susanu. I didn't recognize Mazu and Susanu, and I looked them up. Mazu is the Chinese goddess of the sea, and Susanu is a Japanese god of the sea. Callum also describes the crew that is going around doing stuff. Sometimes a crew member looks through a periscope and is then consumed by the periscope. And their mission, he doesn't know what the mission is to do, but they have missiles. And the missiles whisper to Callum, but they burn him when he touches them. And he's scared of starting this mission. The only thing that will stop them from doing this mission is a mine or a depth charge. And if this happens, he describes the breach that occurs if a mine or depth charge happens and water fills in, or a fire starts, or both things happen, and describes those killed in any of those situations in very gruesome ways. And then for Callum himself, stuck at the radio, if there's a depth charge, it makes the metal crush all around him. He's not buried by water, he's not burned by fire, but it is the metal tomb all around him. All throughout this, they did a really good job here. I mean, they've been doing a really good job for this, but the statements or cases that are being read out, it starts sort of diegetically in scene and then transitions into as if we are directly listening to it. Does that make sense? How the voice of the character or voice actor or whoever that is being delivered shifts away from as if we're listening to a recording that is listening to something else, but as if we are directly listening to it. So here we begin with Olivia hearing Callum's voice through the radio, and then Callum's voice becomes a lot clearer as if we are the radio, listening through the radio. We are not hearing a recording of a recording, we are hearing just him speaking, and then it smoothly transitions back into that hearing him through the radio in this recording. And that's always really fun. They did a really good job here doing that. And that happens as we transition into scene 3. Sam and Georgie appear, and they're looking for Callum and Olivia. Sam says he found a gun, and Callum is dying in the radio. And he keeps intoning, and he's just describing how he dies, being crushed alive. And Georgie doesn't recognize anything in this location. She says everything is new, everything is changing. Sam picks up the gun. He finally has a gun. He doesn't know how to use it. He doesn't know how to hold it. And so Georgie shows him how to hold it. And they're trying to figure out what to do now. And Melanie calls out all of a sudden in the distance. Melanie and Basira come. Georgie's like, Basira, you should be doing patrol. And Basira's like, I'm not going to do that. I'm the main character, basically. And Melanie says that she tried to reach Georgie, but Callum is jamming every frequency. And so she can't get to her. Basira came with Melanie to guide her. And Melanie says that Alice has left the medical ward, presumably following Sam. So now we have Alice on the lam, the archivist on the lam, a zone that we do not trust, and Sam with a gun. Melanie says that she's been trying to keep track of the positions of other wardens as they pass through the zone, and their locations do not make sense. It is not making any sense what's happening, and no one is realizing that. And they realize that because she is blind, she is unaffected by the effect that the archivist has, because they think the archivist is misleading the wardens using their eyes to make them see things that aren't there, or not see things that are there, causing a lot of trouble. Georgie orders all the wardens to fall back and also to alert her if they see Alice. And Melanie begins to lead the way, as she is the only one who can trust her instincts, because everyone else's eyes are being manipulated by the archivist, which we haven't seen that before, but is totally within the realm of possibility. Sam asks if the archivist can see through their eyes, and there's a moment here Basira hopes not, says that she does not want this to be a repeat of things with Elias, and Sam asks what she means, but Georgie brushes him off, says ignore her, we have to focus on other things, which is like, okay, yeah, I see what you're doing here, I see what you're doing here. As they keep walking, all of a sudden the ground underneath them breaks, and they fall through the ground. We transition into scene 4. Melanie and Sam are together, and Melanie thinks that she broke her arm. Melanie says that there are the London's tunnels underneath have not been kept up, so it's very easy for it to break, and that's what happened. She cannot navigate underneath these tunnels. She doesn't know these tunnels well. Melanie calls out to George and Basira, and Melanie stops him. She tells him, "You don't know what else is listening," which I believe is a direct reference to several quotes from the Magnus archives. Sam helps Melanie's arm get put into a temporary sling, and they're like trying to assess what to do now, and all of a sudden, the archivist appears. And real nice moment here, Melanie steps up and asks John, "Is that you?" She's reaching out to her friend with hopes that if he is stuck, that she can help him. But no, the archivist says, "No, I'm archivist." That's not a direct quote, but it confirms it is not John. And she asks, "Were you ever Jonathan Sims?" And it says, "No, but I have his story." Okay, interesting. And then Sam asks, "Who are you then, if you're not John? If you're not Jonathan Sims, who are you?" And the archivist, getting a little sassy here, says, "Oh, who am I? Well, I'm the one who asks Sam, 'Who are you?' and begins to compel Sam." Sam begins intoning about like a childhood zoo for some reason, something that happened in that zoo. Sam's childhood was riddled with things that happened to him. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Alice appears, tackles the archivist, and begins fighting it to defend Sam. Basira and Georgie start approaching from the distance, calling out. And at this moment, there's a struggle. It's kind of hard to understand. I did have to read the transcript to understand it. The archivist pins Alice down, and it says that her story has been told and tired. Ooh, that's a drag. And Alice calls out to Sam. She tells him, "I love," and then the archivist kills Alice. Sam obviously calls out to Alice, scared, seeing that she's dead. And Georgie begins to approach, and the archivist turns to Sam and calls him lucky, and then leaves. And then Georgie and Basira finally appear, and the tape ends here. In scene 5, they are in the medical office, and Georgie fixes Melanie's arm, and Sam is really sad about Alice's death. He says, she wasn't my Alice, but still, it sucks. And Basira apologizes for not getting there in time, but he says that if Alice hadn't been there, he would be dead instead. And so she sacrificed her life for his. And Georgie says that she wants to continue. She says, "I know that we all want to rest, but we need to deal with the archivist." And Basira starts to object, but Sam interrupts. He agrees with Georgie, "We need to focus on the archivist." Melanie confirms with Georgie and Basira that the archivist is not John, which is a relief. But Basira says that there's another problem, and that she's noticed the zone growing. She says that it is 1 meter past the fence already. And it seems that the zone has been growing since the archivist has appeared. And this moment, real fun. This is episode 50, right before the hiatus. A good checkpoint episode. The last sentence is Georgie saying, "Oh, fuck." And the episode ends. Fun, interesting episode, fun episode. Some things I'm not totally happy about, but overall, hell yeah. Notes, season 4 Q&A part 2. In that episode, in that Q&A, Alexander J. Newell talked about wanting to feature coffin syndrome in submarines. And I remember seeing the early release for this episode and seeing that it deals with submarines. And I was like, oh, finally Alexander J. Newell is getting to do the thing that he found very interesting that he couldn't integrate into season 5. And so that was really nice to see. He finally did it. So, entities present, or at least for me, some symbols or motifs that echo and connect to entities or manifestations that we've seen before for different entities. The TLDR, entities present. The eye, obviously, the archivist is there. The spiral, the door that Olivia sees, is a direct connection to the distortion. I don't think it specifically is the distortion because distortion is dead. However, very spiral. Lonely, the fog with the teeth. The fog thing is lonely thing. The teeth can be hunt, but I think the fog with teeth is a lonely thing. Maybe. Slaughter, this episode felt mostly a combination of slaughter and buried. I will get to buried, but mostly buried and slaughter, specifically because of the captain. There's a moment where the Callum puts on bloody pins. The pins that like award medal pins for like military stuff are pinned into his chest, and that makes him bleed. And there's also this really interesting section. He says he fears for the mission. We will do something terrible, something unforgivable, something that will scar our souls in ways that will leave us other than human. And that feels very slaughter adjacent. And also, it feels very similar to the episode 163 in the trenches, which is also a slaughter domain. And anything with like military and stuff like that, that's pretty slaughter adjacent. And so I feel pretty safe saying that slaughter is present here for that. The vast is a obvious one here. Is they're underwater, it's an abyss. All the sea gods being mentioned like that felt very vast coded to me. Desolation, the missiles burning into Callum, saying that they can be safe to put their payload into his body. That felt very desolation. Could also be slaughter, but the burning specifically felt like desolation to me. This one's a little looser. Flesh for the periscope eating people. That felt fleshy because of what happened to the body. That's also just scary in general. But yeah, that. And then buried, obviously, because of the crushing pressure. And that is also how Callum describes himself dying. After there's a depth charge, the metal twists all around him and he starts choking and dying. And he says he breathes his last breath and he dies. And everything of this episode in general, separate from the entities, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different entities that I'm naming. That's more than half of all of the rest of the entities. But anyways, yeah, all of this statement also feels very similar to episode 15 in Protocol, Well Run, the first victim of the archivist, the drowned victim that Alice encounters in the middle of the street. Her description is more about just drowning in general and not within a submarine, but there are some parallels here in terms of things to fear underwater. There might have been some dark in there too, but there wasn't that much focus on the dark. The dark was more set dressing than anything. So I wish they would have done more with the dark, but it is what it is. And also, it's a domain. Smirch 14 doesn't fit exactly in these domains, but it's fun to try to. One thing that I keep coming back to again and again is that these statements, these cases, maybe like a quarter of them to like a third of them don't really have any effect in the plot. In the Magnus archives, less than a quarter of the statements do not affect the plot, but there is a vast majority. There's 200 episodes of the Magnus archives where it's okay for not all of the episodes to factor into the plot. In Protocol, when there's 90 total episodes, and this is episode 50, and maybe every third episode the case or the statement doesn't really affect the plot, then that's a little annoying. But at least it was well written. I will say that. I liked how it was written. Also, I do think it was a really fun idea for it. It felt like intentional, like obviously we've seen the archivist consume statements from people just to eat, just to feed. But here there was an additional sort of benefit that I sort of saw is that, Callum is jamming the radio. There's no way for them to easily communicate with each other because Callum keeps intoning in the radio. And so it feels like the archivist is purposely doing that. It's purposefully jamming all the radio frequencies so that it messes with stuff, along with messing with the vision of the wardens. I think that's a really fun idea. I think that's the implication here. Also, is the implication that Callum is stuck in the radio? That's also terrifying. That feels like extinction. But I think the implication is that Callum's in the radio because they can't find his body. And I'm assuming that Olivia got eaten by the fog with teeth. Did Sam find Olivia's gun? I don't know. Talking about the archivist, I'm still kind of confused in a good way as to what it wants. I still do not have a grasp as to the archivist's motivations. I thought it wanted to come to this location. I don't think that's what it wants. I don't understand what it's doing. And neither do the characters, and I think that is part of the mystery. However, it has gone a long time, and I'm getting antsy. Like, what does it want to do? What do these actions mean? But that will be answered eventually. We get confirmation here that Archivist is not John Sims, and that's good. But it also says that it has his story. I don't know what that exactly means, but that's a really fun way to put it. When I listened to it, I first thought it said I was his story, or I was something. I don't remember what it was, but I heard something else. I didn't hear has his story. But that's also really fun. It knows about Sims, at least. It also says Sims very distastefully, as if it doesn't like that. So that tells me that it does not even like John Sims. And so that gives a little bit of credence to this theory. I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. This is a theory that I have about the archivist and what it is. This is what Annabelle predicted was going to happen. In episode 197, Connected, Basira and John ask Annabelle Kane, when they're in the abyss and the chasm between realities, they ask her what will happen when the fears pass over. And she says that she doesn't know. She might get pulled with it. She might die. But everyone else, including John will lose the parts of him that are the I. And I think, so the fears leave Archives world, get spread out into other worlds, which includes Protocol. I theorize that the parts of John that were the I were pulled out of him and sent away, and they somehow landed into Protocol, became the Archivist, and the Archivist is the parts of John that were the I. And if it does not like John, assuming from the way that it said John's name distastefully, that gives me the feeling that it didn't like being trapped in the human John, because John is human and didn't want to give into the powers of the I. But this is just straight up monster that wants to kill people and eat people's statements. And so I feel like that is what happened to the Archivist. Is the Archivist has John's story. Does that mean it was John, the parts of John that were the I? Does it also deal with eyes a lot? That's fun. I like that. And also, hey, you know what that means? If the Archivist is the parts of John that were the I, pulled from him and placed into Protocol, that means that Annabelle can still win. What happened to Annabelle at the end of the season, at the end of the show? I don't know. We don't know. She scurried off as a spider. But she says that she might get pulled with it, or she might die. And what's more fun is if Annabelle Kane came to Protocolverse following or being pulled by along with the Archivist, the parts of John that were the I, and is in Protocol now, and said, hey, I have a lot more power here now. Let me make a company called Elric Capital because I also watched Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. This is Annabelle speaking, obviously. Annabelle says, I already watched Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood and I like these characters, like the alchemy here. So I'm gonna, hey, there's alchemy here. Let me name this new company that does a capitalism with the fears, with the horrors, and name it after this alchemy show. And also redact my name from all official documents so that no one knows who I am as a CEO of Elric Capital Investments. This is how Annabelle Kane can still win. Anyways, that is all I have for this episode. Thank you so much for coming on this journey with me. Please let me know if I got anything wrong or got something right that you really like as well. Let me know any thoughts that you had so far for these past 4 episodes, which have been pretty good. I will say that compared to, well, last crop of 4 were pretty good as well. But 47 Repetitive Strain was fine. I think it's the weakest of these last 4 episodes. But 48 Temporary Positions, really fun, Anya Villette. And then Pipelines is so good. And then this one, Deep Trouble, also pretty good as well. I am so excited to do a ranking for this season because this season has been pretty good. And it's going to be so hard to try to rank different episodes. But anyways, that's not till later. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on this journey with me. Now, there will be a hiatus between episodes 50 and 51. I do not know how long the hiatus will be. I have not heard, seen, or anything about that. I did ask the Reddit if anyone's heard about how long. And I assume that in like the 2 weeks before they begin again, they will announce, hey, we're coming back in 2 weeks. So that's something to look forward to as well. So it will be a hot minute until I return to my channel to talk about the Magnus protocol. So follow my Tumblr. That's where I post about Magnus protocol things. If I really want to post it there, I will update there. It'll be linked in the description. That's where I Magnus post. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and share with your friends. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to be passionate, and I'll see you later.